Hi everyone, and welcome to the Knit California channel. My name is Leslie. I'm a knitter, crocheter, spinner, yarn enthusiast, pattern designer in Southern California, and today I've got a whole video on one finished object, my Ingrid sweater. This pattern is the first in a new series of videos that I want to start making on the channel, where I have a dedicated video for each of my finished objects. I figured this would be a fun new type of video to have on the channel in case anyone is out there who is thinking about knitting any of these designs that I am making, and I can have all of my information, all of my thoughts and feelings on these designs in one dedicated video. And so today we are talking about the Ingrid sweater by Petite. Today is September 14th. I'm not wearing this sweater because it is 80 degrees outside and a little bit warm here in my craft room, but I will make sure to have photos and video clips up the entire time I'm talking about this sweater so you can see how it looks on me. I may even put up some photos of from the pattern page, from Petite Knit's pattern page, so you can see what it looks like on her. And yeah, okay, we're going to be talking about the yarn I used, the sizing and like schematics and details of the pattern itself, my knitting experience, and my overall thoughts and feelings. So let's start with the pattern page on Ravelry, and I can give you some of the details here. So like I said, this is the Ingrid sweater by Petite Knit. This pattern came out in March of 2022, and I had been lusting over knitting this pattern basically since March of 2022, and so I'm really happy I finally was able to knit it this year in 2024. The yarn weight called for this is a worsted weight yarn. The gauge is 20 stitches and 30 rows per 4 inches, and the needle sizes recommended are 4mm needle US 6, 3.5mm US 4, and 3mm US 2.5. The sizes available go from an extra small through a 5XL, and that corresponds with a bust circumference of 30.5 inches up to 59 inches. And this is classified as like an advanced pattern. The difficulty that Petite Knit gives this is a 5 out of 5 stars. And I can see why that difficulty rating is given because of all the different sections, all the different types of textures. There is a lot of stuff going on in this pattern. You know, it is not a simple stockinette, raglan, or round yoke pattern. This is a drop shoulder, so the beginning part of it is knit in panels. You start with the back panel, then you pick up stitches for the front right, the front left, you join the front panel in the round at the neck, you finish knitting the front panel, and then you join the front and the back panel in the round to knit the body. And all the while you're doing that, each like chunk is a different stitch pattern. So there is a double moss stitch section, which double moss stitch is a knit one, purl one, knit one, purl one, and then purl one, knit one, purl one, knit one, all the way across. There is a mock cable section, that's what it's called. In my head I call this like the cross hatching section, but these are the ones with the little X's. There's the 2x2 rib section, and then the finishes have 1x1 rib, and in between each of the section are the eyelet rows, which is basically a yarn over, well, the way I did it is a yarn over and a knit two together. The way that it's written in the pattern is slightly different. There are also increases, make one right, make one left increases, and some make one purlwise increases, also used for the back panel and for some of the underarm shaping as well. So there is a lot going on in this pattern. If you are an experienced knitter, you've knit a couple sweaters, I mean, look, all of these different sections are really just knits and purls in a different combination, right? You can do this. You take it one section at a time, and it's okay, it's not that hard. And when you really start knitting this, I found this to be very like what we call potato chippy. I would really want to finish one section. I would really want to finish the little eyelet yolks. Why do I call them eyelet yolks? I would really want to finish the little eyelet rows in between so that I could get into the next section. It was always fun to see what was going to be next, to change the stitch pattern, and to like keep going on and on. Now, I cast this pattern on January 12th, and I really don't like saying this, but I finished this pattern on August 16th. So in a way, this took me 8 months to knit, but I did intentionally put this project on hold around May timeframe, the spring, because I knew like if I finished it in May, I wasn't even going to be able to wear it until fall, and there were other projects I wanted to work on at the same time. So it went into hibernation on May 1st. I took it out of hibernation on August 4th, and that's when I finished it in 12 days. I really just at that point had to finish both sleeves. I had started the first sleeve and I had made it past the short row shaping on this first section of the sleeve, and so I just had to finish the rest of the first sleeve and the second sleeve. An interesting part to the pattern, I will say, is that there are short rows on the sleeves. You can kind of see that here, where the top part here, this is much longer than the bottom part here. And what this does is when your sleeve hangs down, when you're wearing it, it just helps the sleeve lay more flat. Instead of it going like out like this, it hangs down like this. So kind of fun, something a little bit different. Yeah. Okay, there's one more thing that I wanted to add about the Ingrid sweater construction. This is me from the future, almost ready to edit this video. And I wanted to talk to you about the sleeve construction and the charts in the pattern and how they don't really line up. So I had heard a lot about the sleeve construction before I had gotten to that part in the pattern. A lot of people were telling me, hey, the charts for the sleeves don't really make sense. The thing with the sleeve instructions is while you are knitting each of the different sections, there is an at the same time instruction that tells you to decrease every 8 rounds or whatever it is. And the charts for the sleeve do not include these decreases. And so what that means is you have to keep track of them yourself, and you also have to be a little bit knowledgeable with reading your knitting and understanding how to like modify the chart a little bit to fit the number of stitches that you have on your round at that time. The parts where, well, the sections that this happens in are in the double moss stitch section. So when you are at that point, you just want to make sure after you've done a decrease and you're switching from like a knit 2 purl 2 round to a purl 2 knit 2 round, you just want to make sure your first couple of stitches line up with what they need to be so that your next few stitches keep the pattern repeat going. And you're also going to need to watch out for this in the mock cables section. I think this is the section that, well, this is the section that tripped me up the first time. So the chart tells you to do the cross stitches on the first and last stitches of the round when you first start the chart. And you really don't need to do those because as you decrease, that is just like a mock cable going nowhere. So I omitted that on the second sleeve. And then there are, I think, at least 2 decreases in that faux cable section. And so you just want to make sure you're lining up those faux cables. If you know how to read your knitting, you can figure out which stitches those faux cables need to be, and you can kind of disregard the first couple stitch instructions from the chart and just keep going with what that pattern repeat needs to be. So just keep that in mind. I think this pattern, if you don't really know how to read your stitches very well, will really help you with that, really get you to understand like what do your knits look like, what do your purls look like on the right side of your fabric, what do decreases look like, you can see them in your fabric, what do increases look like, and for those faux cable sections, you know, what do those stitches look like, what's the anatomy of them, and you know, make sure you've got the correct stitches lined up on your needle to complete those stitches. I think maybe I made it sound a little harder than it actually is, so I hope that this helps you in understanding at least how I went about those stitches and that section of the pattern on the sleeve decreases. I know some other people have done it in different ways, so just use what works for you. I've heard that some people gave me the instructions that they like didn't do any sleeve decreases at all until the bottom of the sleeve and then kind of did them a little bit more rapidly. That'll give you more of like a balloon shape sleeve where it's like wide and then it comes in a little bit faster. I think that's a really cute look, so if that's what you want to go for, like go for it. But yeah, it's up to you. It's you're the one knitting it, so make sure you make a decision that works for you. Okay, that's the update I wanted to give you on the sleeve. I should have talked about that yesterday. Anyways, back to the video. Okay, let's talk about the yarn that I used in this project. So I used this Treehouse Knits yarn in the colorway Harvest Moon. This is her Dove DK weight base, which is a 100% superwash merino wool, 246 yards per 100 grams. And it's this lovely, like dusty lilac, gray, purple colorway that I am in love with. I really, 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 really like colors that look like this. And so I'm really happy with the overall look of this sweater in this tonal yarn. I think it looks really good, and I think it's got really, really good stitch definition. Now, you may remember me saying up front that the pattern recommends a worsted weight yarn, and I used a DK weight yarn. Well, this was like a big topic of conversation for me when I first cast this on in January, and I was also even considering knitting the men's version of this pattern because there is an Ingrid sweater man pattern, and in that pattern it is a DK weight yarn that is recommended. I was looking around at it, I was asking people what they did, and I had a couple of people reach out to me and just say like, hey, like the gauge is 20 stitches per 4 inches. If you can meet that with DK weight yarn, that is a relatively typical gauge for DK weight yarn, like you're fine to continue. And I thought about it and I was like, yeah, I typically meet, you know, 20 to 22 stitches on 4.5 millimeter needles with DK weight yarn, so let me try this out. And I tested it out. I was able to meet gauge perfectly with this DK weight yarn and with 4.5 millimeter needles, and it worked out. It was great. I had no issues. So just keep that in mind. I mean, if you do have a worsted weight yarn, it will be a little bit thicker. I'm really glad that I used a DK weight yarn so that it's not as thick and not as heavy. For me, this is just going to be way more wearable than a worsted weight yarn will be in my climate here in Southern California. In terms of modifications, I did not really make any, well, actually, hold on. Let me check. In terms of other modifications, I didn't really make too many other modifications. The neckline is probably the biggest one. You can see how the neckline looks in the pattern. There's actually 2 different options that you can choose. I definitely did not want the like mock turtleneck option. That I knew was not going to be for me, and I really liked the gray version that she had on the pattern page that just had a 1x1 rib collar. Now this on the pattern page does look like it's a folded over collar, and I chose to just do a not folded over collar. You can see it's just a single layer. And after wearing this a couple times, just around the house for like a couple hours at a time, it still really has been too warm in general to wear this a whole lot. But I am considering taking out the bind off on this collar and adding a bit more length to it and folding it over. I feel like I have just recently really started to appreciate a folded over collar. I think they feel really squishy, they look really polished and really finished. I don't think they add a lot of extra like warmth or like weight to a pattern. And I personally prefer when my neckbands are a lot closer fitting to my neck. I don't like when there's like gaps like this and you can see like this part of my skin. I don't know. To me, it just feels like it's not fitting me in the way that I want it to fit. So that's kind of where this is sitting now. I could just put elastic in it and leave it, but I have kind of been feeling like maybe I want to make this a folded over collar. I just think it would look really nice and really polished and really finished. So that is something that I'm considering updating after the fact, and I figured I would let you know that as well. The only other modification, and it is talked about in the pattern, is when you are going to like choose the finish length for both the body and the sleeves, the place where you can play around with the number of rows is in this last 2x2 rib section. In the pattern, it tells you when you start this section, like, try it on, see how many more inches you want to go. Remember you're doing, you know, I think this is like 2 to 2.5 inches of ribbing for the actual hem. And if you would like to make any changes to the length of your sweater, this is the section that you want to do it in. So for both the body and for the sleeves, I did try everything on first before I decided on that length. For the body, I did not do the full number of rows that were recommended, and for the sleeves I did do the full number of rows that were recommended. I have relatively long arms, so I needed that full sleeve length there to make my sleeves fit the length that I wanted them to be. So while I knit my sweater in a hand-dyed yarn DK weight, I wanted to also give you a couple of options of affordable yarns in case you're looking to knit this sweater but don't have it in the budget to use a hand-dyed yarn like I did. So if you go to the Ravelry project page and you click on yarn options, there are 12 pages of ideas here for different yarns that people have used in their project. There are also 2,344 projects on Ravelry for this sweater, and I don't even think I have added my project. Have I added mine onto Ravelry yet? Let's see. Nope, I'm behind. So when I add mine onto Ravelry, that'll be 2,345 projects on here, which is just crazy. So I'm seeing some commercial yarns on here that are definitely a bit more affordable than hand-dyed yarn. The first one is the Sandnes Pure Ghent. This is actually the recommended yarn for the pattern, so definitely something to check out if you can get your hands on some Sandnes Pure Ghent. I know a lot of yarn shops sell this, but it is not in any like big box stores. The Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino is an option. For me personally, I would not use the Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino. I don't really like the hand feel of it, but that's going to be a personal preference. Knit Picks Wool of the Andes Worsted. This is definitely an affordable yarn option, and I know they have a ton of different colors. Barocco Ultra Alpaca. Okay, that's an interesting option. Knitting this entirely in alpaca would make it very warm if you're in a cooler climate. Although I don't know if... Now let's see if I can look at some of these patterns. I was going to say I don't know about the stitch definition using an alpaca yarn with all of these cables and different stitches, but it actually doesn't look too bad, and an alpaca yarn would be incredibly drapey, so that is something to think about. Cascade 220 is also another option, very affordable, and I know that comes in a variety of different colors. There's also a superwash version and a non-superwash version. I have not used Cascade 220, but I would maybe recommend the non-superwash version. I feel like it would not be quite as heavy as the superwash version would be, and it could be a really great affordable option, like I said before. Okay, and those are just some of the options from the first page of this. Like I said, there's 12 pages on here, so go wild. Okay, and let me just tell you a little bit more about my specific sizing in case you're interested. So I knit the size extra large, which is the 5th pattern size, meant to have 50.5 inches of positive ease. This pattern in general is designed to have 8 inches of positive ease, and I actually never measured the finished object. So I'm gonna do that right now. Okay, so my finished object is 23.5 inches in width, which makes it 47 inches in circumference, right? 23, 46, 47 inches, which gives me about 3 to 4 inches of positive ease. I was actually thinking this had a little bit more positive ease, but I am really happy with the fit overall, and I am just so excited to wear this sweater out and about when it gets cold and on my trip to Ireland coming up. So stay tuned for photos and video clips of all of that. In terms of my general knitting experience, I really enjoyed knitting this pattern. There were a couple times getting into spring where I was kind of over it and I just like wished it was done, but I think that was my own personal issue because I had cast on so many other projects at the same time. If I had worked on this a little bit more monogamously as like the only sweater that I was working on, I think it would have gone a lot quicker, number one, and I don't think I would have gotten as sick of it as I did getting into spring there. But when I picked this back up in August, I was like on a roll. I was like, I'm finishing this right now. I'm really enjoying working on these sleeves, working on these stitch patterns again. It was really, really fun for me. So overall, I would definitely recommend this pattern if you are interested in big textured knits. If you've never done lace or cables before, this is another great option because like I said before, each of the texture sections are just knits and purls. There's actually no cabling involved. The cross hatching section, the mock cables, are a little bit interesting to knit, but they're kind of fun, and I think they're explained really well in the pattern also. So if you're not interested in like a big statement piece, or you prefer to just knitting stockinette, if you prefer to just knit stockinette in general, this is not going to be a pattern for you, and that's okay. There are plenty other patterns out there that will be for you. So that is my Ingrid sweater. I hope this video was helpful for you if you're interested in knitting this. And yeah, if you have any questions about my knitting experience or the pattern in general, leave them in the comments down below. Obviously, I am not the designer of this pattern, so if it's like a super technical question, I might not be the best person to ask about it, but in my, general knitting experience and knitting this pattern, I can try to give you some tips and tricks and what I experienced as any sort of answer. So if you're new to my channel, thank you so much for watching. I would love if you would consider subscribing. I am on a journey to reach 10K subscribers by the end of this year, and it would mean so much to me for you to join my community. And if you want to see more of a weekly podcast update where I talk about all the patterns that I am working on, that I have recently finished, all the yarn that I'm buying, spinning, updates, all of that I talk about on my weekly podcast episodes. So make sure you subscribe so you you don't miss out on any of those updates. Knit California is also on Facebook. If you don't have Instagram and you only have Facebook, all of my posts and reels that I post on Instagram get cross-posted over on Facebook. So you can go search for Knit California and like and follow that page to stay up to date on everything I'm working on. Okay, I think that is it. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you on the next one. Bye!